Welcome to Red Eyes Creations Radio. Glad to have you with us, and thank you for tuning in. If you are a regular or a new listener tuning in for the first time, good to have you here. My name is Henrik Palmgren, and we are coming to you from Sweden in Scandinavia. We are here with a new program every Thursday and Sunday. You can find us from around the globe 24/7 through our website, redicecreations.com. That's REDICE creations.com. On our website you'll find radio archives, a very busy news section with interesting, important, upsetting and also some positive stories from around the world. We also have a member section containing extended interviews with many of our guests, short films, live feeds, and where you can find our entire and growing radio archive going back over 2 years. Today we have author and researcher Michael Tsarion back with us on the program, and Michael has a new book on Astro Theology coming out soon. After he's concluded his magnum opus on Irish origins, he's coming out with a new one, so he's definitely keeping busy. And this is what we're going to dive into here today. The website is michaeltsarion.com. That will take you to all of Michael's other sites with writings, books, DVDs, and much more. But the main site that you need to take a look at relating to our program today is astro-theology.net. That's astro-theology.net. Michael is also one of the speakers at the upcoming Beyond Knowledge conference in Liverpool, England. So if you're in the UK area, or somewhere in Europe for that matter, and want to catch Michael's talk on a Beyond Knowledge conference, stay tuned. We're going to talk more about that at the end of our program here today. We had a lot of requests to have you back on the show, Michael, and we've been eager ourselves to do another program with you, so it's a pleasure having you back. Hi and welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Henrik. It's always a pleasure, and always thank you for your great show and for the time that you spend with myself and other, authors and researchers. It's always, appreciated.
Very good. Excellent to have you back, Michael. It's going to be a great show. And I want to begin here today to read a quote from your new upcoming book. And I really like this paragraph a lot. Christians do not need to find salvation from sin. They need to find salvation from priestly deceivers who have everything to lose should their congregations discover the true origins of their religion. They need to be saved from mythmongers and forgers guilty of cannibalizing and re-scripting the traditions of the ancient cults. Christian theology is based on Astro Theology. It is a corrupt hybrid of Irish Druidism and Egyptian Amenism. The future of Christianity depends upon this truth being widely known and accepted. It depends upon the exposure of deceivers in high places who continue to profit from the ignorance and blind faith of millions of men and women who, despite their own resistance and apathy, deserve to know the truth. Last year you did a 5-hour DVD, Michael, entitled Astro Theology and Sidereal Mythology. And now pretty soon here you have a new book then coming out on the subject of Astro Theology. Is this a companion book to the DVD, or why did you decide to write this, Michael?
It is a companion, Henrik. Thanks first for reading that caption from the book. And yeah, the DVD has been very successful. It's one of the first DVDs on this subject. It's not the first. Of course, my mentor Jordan Maxwell has labored for 30 years to bring this to the fore, and he's the ultimate student and researcher in this subject, and this, through my studies with him, that it honed a lot of my interest and also my own studies. I had studied astrotheology before I'd met Jordan, but I didn't. Man, there's so many pieces missing. I didn't have the full picture, and of course I didn't realize that such a man like him existed who'd already did the 30 years of research and could answer all of these questions that I had. And believe me, if he wasn't in my life, there would have been no way that either my DVD nor my book would have come into existence. Both these items are dedicated to Jordan, and always every time I even write a sentence or even continue my studies, I'm always conscious of his contribution, because I mean, you can study something for a long, long time, but this is an extremely diverse subject. Actually, it encompasses. I've always described Astro Theology as the subject of subjects, because, like in many of these arcane areas, you're not just studying one subject; you're studying many. It's not just about beating one subject to death. It's about trying to encompass all of the world's mysteries. It's a real task, So I had a lot of these pieces, say, of the jigsaw, but I didn't know the full picture. So it was just great for to get in touch with Jordan and then realize that we had so much in common with this, and to continue. So that the DVD first and foremost was put together, but then it's been just so successful, and people have loved it, and they've wanted more. They wanted more, and so then I thought, okay, well, look. Can do part 2, look at, Astro Theology DVD part 2, but then what that does is it breaks up the Origins and Oracles series of programs, because then people are going to go, okay, well, wait a minute, I've got volume 1, but then, volume 2, it sort of pulls the Astro Theology out to be a box set of its own, which I don't want to have happen.
Right. So,
and more importantly than that is, like, how many DVDs could you produce on Astro Theology? I mean, no amount of DVDs could really do justice to the subject, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, it just felt like the time was right now to collate my notes and, collate all the material I've been collecting for years. People have also just said, we want more on this, why don't you do a book? So again, to answer your question in brief, it is just a people's demand, basically, because again, I didn't plan this. It wasn't even planned last year. It was something that people have said, we want more on that particular subject. We love the DVD.
Right.
Maybe we can do a book. And it fits because my Atlantis book is a companion, after all, of the Atlantis DVD.
Right.
So I've already done one. I've already done a companion book to the DVD. So I thought, okay, well, why not? Let's make Astro Theology have a companion book, So it should be done in about a month or so,
Very good. The book and the DVD, of course, deal with the hidden roots of religion. Of course, the first question that comes to mind is, why would one want to study Christianity's ancient hidden roots, particularly when so many young people nowadays could not care less about religion, and since so many believers, I guess, have fallen away from their religions?
They have. Of course, that has been the case in the last 30 years. It's... I guess the best way to answer that is that the church has nothing to fear from those people who've turned away. A lot of people who are agnostic, a lot of people who will become atheistic, they think in their minds that by them not participating, because they just don't go to church and get sprinkled with holy water, that in some way the church is in some way threatened by that.
Right.
Let me make it very clear that that is not the case. Just because you have found out that it's not worth your time, or you have a few, quandaries about it, or you didn't like the pastor, or, you don't like the whole suit and tie, gig or whatever, just because you have bowed out for whatever reason is in no way threatening to the establishment that has caused so much misery in this world. And the reason is because an ignorant agnostic and an ignorant atheist is about as little of a threat, is about the same amount of threat as the ignorant believer. Sitting in the pews, you see. I mean, the main common denominator is ignorance. It doesn't mean you're ignorant outside the door of the church, carrying on your little daily life, or you're ignorant sitting listening to the guy every Sunday on the hour. It is of no importance as long as ignorance, you see, is the key. And this is unfortunately what it is. So my message, Jordan's message, is not just to bore agnostics and atheists who've already go, look, I know it's all bunk. I already don't go to church. I already, could care less about this. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything. It's not just to say, pat these people on the back and go, well done. That's mighty good of you to, know that.
Right.
It's to say that your ignorance is still participant. I don't want people to turn away from Christianity or Judaism or any of these Leviathans ignorantly. I want both the believers, this is the people who read the Bible and are studying it assiduously and who want to know the mystery of these traditions, and I want the person who doesn't want to do anything with the institution to be empowered through knowledge.
Right.
This is the key thing,
Yeah.
This is the key thing to remember.
So
and of course the most important reason is because there's a why would you want to study religion is because there is an entire crime syndicate out there called the Vatican. Right. Called the Judeo-Christian organization that is, as you said in the beginning, profiting from the millions of people who don't know that this religion is damaging to your health. They'll put smoke kills on every box of cigarettes.
Huh.
And signs all over the freeways and all other things, don't put the cat in the microwave, and you got lists, especially in America, you hold the handrails, walk on the left. You'll have every kind of, mantra repeated dozens of times about your other safety,
right,
so-called. But where is the skull and bones, poison, deadly, lethal, toxic waste? Where's that sign on religion? Nowhere to be found.
Right.
And then people look at me and Jordan and think, oh boy, you guys are, iconoclastic. You guys are really something. Keep on putting this religion down. Oh yeah? Well, let's take around the graveyards and see how many people, they'd be agreeing only they're dead.
And also, if we study a little bit on the background on some of these other so-called, isms that have popped up lately, like communism, so forth, Nazism, there is in many cases, if we follow that evidence, of trails of evidence, a lot of evidence saying that this is actually connected with the Vatican and the Catholic Church, and then the whole, situation becomes instantaneously very much different,
It does, and ultimately, you see, this has been proven. This has been, hands down proven. I mean, Avro Manhattan. Now you have more recently John Phelps. There's not a stone that's been left unturned in the research community proving that the Vatican has not only been in cahoots with the Soviets, with Mussolini, with the fascists, Russia, with Hitler. This has all been right up, clearly made into plain view as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not talking about Roman Catholics, of course, endorsing any of this. This is not what we mean. The Vatican is an institution. It's a state within a state. It's a political edifice.
Yeah.
But of course, those people who've tracked all of this, financial, economic, militaristic sort of goings on, that's great. My work focuses more on their mind control, the whole other psychodynamics,
right,
of the way that they might be controlling man, and what it is in man also that allows himself to be, so deceived like this.
Do the clergymen know that they're, consciously deceiving people?
For the most part, yeah. For the most part, they do. I mean, I have no problem understanding that because I've come from Belfast, where it's very flagrant. That's not every person. There are true Christians out there who believe in Christ, and they think they're absolutely sure that the moral code, the Mosaic commandments, etc., is the way to go. There's I don't have an argument with that. I don't have an argument with virtue. I don't have an argument with morality. I don't have an argument with the Bible per se. It's just a book. It's what's been done in the name of God and in the name of that book. You see, don't forget that we can split hairs and say, isn't it really sad? Not that Christianity exists, but isn't it sad that man needs to be promised an eternal paradise, meaning an eternal reward after he's dead, in order to stop him from doing the most cruel and sadistic acts while he's alive? I mean, he doesn't do it of his own nature because it's easy that some, nice religion can just come along and just calmly remind people, be moral, don't do bad things. No. You have to create an entire promissory web and really insinuate into human beings that you're going to live forever after you're dead and you will have endless reward. So for goodness sake, for God's sake, don't do evil things now. And man sits there thinking, well, chewing his bone beside the fire. Well, I guess, all right then. I'll buy into that. Maybe I can, be less sadistic, less, less horrific, less brutal. Mm-hmm. But it's so, to me, it's outrageous that such a thing would have to be concocted in order to get man to be virtuous. Is man not virtuous, or is there perhaps some other way, a better way of bringing out that virtue? Or is it probably just better to face facts and realize, it's not going to happen? Instead of concocting this lie mechanism that says, okay, we'll give you this if you do this. If you do this, we'll give you that,
It's a false virtue. It's a virtue that maybe have been put upon man, maybe at the wrong time also then, in a way.
Yeah. It's a virtue that is compelled. It's a virtue that is not articulated to his deeper drives. It's basically an enforcement. It's basically a commandment, as they say, meaning from outside. You have external virtue, just show external virtue, and you'll get, basically a spiritual reward for it. Just conform. It's a form of conformity. It's not like the Socratic way or the Zen way, or the mystical way. It's not about man learning. I mean, absolutely intimately learning the secret that if you harm another, you harm yourself, like Socrates said.
Yeah.
It's not about man being taught to have such an awareness of the connections between psychic and spiritual energy that they understand that to, kill animals or to, hurt the earth or to hurt other people is devastating to your own spirit. That would be then where the real virtue would arise. No, this is a draconian, it's not even right to even call it virtue. It's more just a convention is probably a better word, social convention.
Yeah. But
the thing is, going back to your question about whether the clergy are conscious, I believe for the very most part they are. 9 times out of 10 they are. But remember, if you work in a chocolate factory, you're probably the last person who'll eat chocolate, right? Because you're sick of it, because you see it all day long.
Yeah.
So just because these people work within the religion and they know that it's full of nonsense, it's all lies, it's or not lies, it's Astro Theology, as my work has proven, doesn't mean that they themselves eat off that same plate.
Right.
That's just a plate that's good for everyone else. They're hypocrites. And the interesting thing about the word hypocrite is that the word actually was a word in Greece that simply meant actor. Did you know that? It just meant actor on a stage.
Really?
That's where the word comes from. It just meant a person who wears a mask, or a person who is playing a part that's been scripted for them by an unseen playwright. Yeah.
It's interesting.
So, in my work I've talked about these unseen playwrights and the Atonists and all. Then we have this coterie who is literally without virtue. They may have this conventional morality. They may have the trappings, the external lineaments of morality and all of this, and the holier than thou, sanctimonious cover. But these are the hypocrites. They actually are just simply actors, and they get a kick out of it. That's fine. They don't have to eat the chocolate. They don't have to eat the same dish as the people in the theater. This is and I mean, we even need to look in. If you do your homework in the Jewish tradition, you'll know that the Jews and the original Hebrew rabbis, they all knew about the existence of the zodiac. They even call it Latin is I think it's a rota signorum, the wheel of signs, the wheel of the signs. The Jewish and the Christian priests absolutely know that their religion is an outgrowth of solar cultism, and they know that, and they also know that the cultism's origins is Irish and not necessarily Egyptian only. Believe me, it's taken centuries for them to even admit, and of course they haven't admitted it. It's scientists who have discovered this. It's archaeologists who've discovered the importance of Egypt. Right. So it's even taken the clergy didn't come along and tell us all of this. Hell, they wouldn't have even told us that the world was circular. They'd have you happily believing it was flat, and that devils are going to steal your body if you have sex with somebody outside marriage and all that stuff. They'd be happy to keep us all in that framework of fear and guilt and ignorance. So it's not that they've come running to us to tell us about the wonderful role of the Egyptians in Christianity. That's been brought out by other scholars, right? And they're certainly never going to admit the role of Ireland, So it's for people like ourselves to start asking the questions and not just blindly accepting all this.
Will things change? I mean, is there hope that tomorrow we can be rid of this poison then?
Well, it's only like the poet Shelley said. This is the Victorian poet Shelley. He said, absolutely, when the last king is strangled with the guts of the last priest. And I look around the world today and don't see any other possible, scenario there. It literally will be, because remember, these actors love the gig, and they're not going to give up of their own free will. They do know what they're doing. They do know that they've cannibalized the ancient traditions, but waiting for them to fold up. That's like Colonel James Bogright said, if you're waiting for Lord Rothschild to roll up his little red carpet and run off back to Europe and say, hey, boss, we couldn't handle it, you may have a long, long wait. Right. And believe me, these princes and religious types are, they're not going anywhere. So as Shelley said, the last king strangled with the guts of the last priest. This is basically what you're going to have to wait for, unless people start, unless we do understand what Jordan and myself are saying and end this and really bring the truth home to these people. But also, you see, because remember, man needs religion because man is not doing his own homework. So the reason why men are into theology is because they're not into psychology. And unfortunately, man needs to be led. He may be intellectually and technically developed, but he's not emotionally or psychologically developed. He's very, in fact, infantile and very fragile on those levels, like a small child. This is unfortunately what we find in a study of mankind that emotionally they're very backward. So, this priestarchy has nothing to fear. This priesthood is there for people as soon as they're traumatized, as soon as any kind of upset comes to them emotionally, you see, any kind of upset in the domestic sphere, or even now, of course, in the political sphere where there's so much trauma going around, all being designed to happen, to force people back into the churches. And even though we said earlier in the program about, that there are agnostics and there are atheists, that is not to forget for a moment that right now the demographics is up again, especially in an American context. People are flooding back to churches. They're flooding back not only to decent churches, but to these, evangelists who are maniacs. People are flooding back to listen to, it's incredible that we have an influx again and a rising interest in the church.
The economics is a little bit down. Things are not maybe on the up and up on all fronts, and then people potentially they go back to the old patterns, because that's routine, I guess, again, falling into that.
That's right. Exactly. But let us never forget, and of course this makes these evangelists, incredibly happy, and also the fact that nobody refutes them. Everybody believes every piece of rubbish they say, because remember, a good 80% of what evangelists say is actually not even in the Bible. The stuff that they spout, and this has been the case even since evangelism started, whether it's about the rapture or about other things that they go on incessantly about, or like, for instance, tithing and giving your money and, all this kind of, none of this is actually in the Bible at all. In fact, quite the opposite. The Bible actually, refutes common prayer and refutes all of these kinds of things. And Christ, his own words, is saying, look, I didn't come here to help you help your brother. Yeah. In the book of Matthew, it's saying, I came with a sword to divide man from all of these social and domestic roles and from his silly wives and his daughters and sons and stuff like that. How come they don't read that?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but what we've got here, my friend, is that we've got the janitors, we've got the butlers, and we got the gatekeepers in the mansion wearing the master's best suit, sipping his brandy from his decanters and putting their feet up on his leather, while he's out to lunch. We don't have true spirituality in the world. We don't even have true psychology in the world. We don't have any interest from the masses into anything real. Nothing. And please don't tell me about the New Age movement, being real. That's another concoction for the most part.
Right.
So we have then the mansion is empty, and all the butlers and the maids and the scullery maids and the kitchen staff are all up, lollygagging around, having a ball. And that's what these priests are, because they've annihilated the Druids, like we spoke of in other shows. They've killed the Wicca. They've massacred all throughout the world. They've killed off anyone else who would know these truths that we're talking about.
Yeah. And
so they have the mansion all to themselves. And if we find the place in wreck and ruin, well, it's our fault as much as it is theirs.
Okay, I guess we can move away into another little bit of area that is interesting in regards to your latest work and you've been writing about, and that is that you said that the pyramid of Egypt was built by visitors from the northwestern lands, and that the very word Giza means goatmen or goths. Care to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, this was an example of what I'm talking about when I say that these moderns, clergy or prelates, you see, have not only lied to us about the role of Egypt, but they've totally done a number on the story of Ireland. But the more information that comes out, the more the people see the facts, the more that we start to see that there's nothing really extraordinary at all about accepting that that these connections existed. Do you remember that they found cocaine in the various tombs and in the coffins of mummies? They found coca leaves,
Indeed.
And the experts are still completely bamboozled about how there could be connections between, say, Egypt and South America,
Right.
And we're still living in that era today where there's a lot of head scratching about this, and oh my goodness, could there be a connection between, say, Scandinavia and Britain, into Egypt? I mean, to me, it's like utterly preposterous,
Right,
because
right.
the history books are already showing you that there was connections, between European, technically Northern European people, like the Scythians, and the land of Galilee, Judea, and so forth and so on. So I mean, it's just out of this world. But that's exactly the point you're saying is absolutely right. They've even discovered. Did you know that long ago this was discovered? I mean, it's been covered up. That in Dendera, which is a very famous temple in Egypt, and it's also very famous because it features one of the most incredible ancient zodiacs.
Yeah.
In the temple of Dendera. Well, they discovered documents in there that show that the Ari or the Arya were responsible for actually building the Great Pyramid. You know, this had already been independently discovered by other professors, but they actually found, you know, because people scream at you about evidence. Well, they found the evidence. And even the architect, the main architect's name was given. And his name ended with the root Ari, A-R-I.
Right.
Which people who know my work on the Irish origins, you see, know as the Aria. It's actually one of the names of the land of Ireland. So anybody who had Ari in their name, it not only meant that they were from the West, it distinguished them as a Druid, as an Arya, one of the Arya. And the name of the man who built the pyramid, who designed it, his name was the Ari. And that positions this person, or his ancestors, you see, you know, in the West. He's a Western adept. And his title, not the meaning of the name, but the title that was given to this character, and the caption I'm talking about is going to be in the new book on Astro Theology. His title was Keeper of the Secrets. So here we are, you know, the Keeper of the Hermetic Secrets, the man of the West. And this is indeed a great secret. You better believe it's a secret. That, you know, you can better believe that Rome and all of these different Orthodox churches who've built their own foundations on the ruins of these ancient people are not going to want this knowledge to be known. How many people listening to us? I mean, let's just cut to the chase, you know, and be very brutal about it. How many people who are listening to this show today ever even heard the word Arya?
Not many.
They may have heard the word Aryan, but my God, that's no good, because whoever heard that word has certainly has got a negative conception of the word. Okay, so even those who go, well, I've heard of it. I've heard of the word Aryan. No, yes, that's an evil word. That's terrible. That's a racist word. You see. So there's my point.
Right.
Yeah. If you have heard of it, you haven't heard of it. So let's make this very clear. And the reason is because you are not meant to hear about it. You're not being told the truth about history. And this age-old fraud, you see, has to continue to be exposed. You can never let up on this until the people of the world have the truth, whether they want it or not.
You know, that potentially could lead us into the area of, you know, just for a moment here, speculate that during the Nazis, if what we talked about earlier, if it is true that the Vatican now again then is behind Nazism and all of the perhaps even beforehand, the theology, so to speak, that arose before Nazism became popular, so to speak, in Germany, that all the surrounding myths about the Aryans, and they were, you know, off to Tibet, obviously, India, looking for this race. Do you think that could possibly have been one of the, you know, concoctions around this, even to at the end of the day, when everything, all the, you know, World War II is over, everything is over, they know that this race, you know, allegedly race for them, then is going to have such a negative connotation that people, consequently after that, is never going to look in that area again. What do you think?
And isn't it true? We only need to look at the results. As I've just said, everyone who has heard that word is going to almost, you know, whisper it, because they're so afraid of what a word means. You know,
right.
Look at the word anti-Semite. You know, let's not question whether there's any logic to the word or to all the, you know, debris that surrounds these terms. We don't even need to get into that. Just try using that term. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that goes also for even the term Nazi. When I look at even the terms that these people are using, even to distinguish themselves, I'm saying, okay, a bunch of Nazis over here are talking about Aryan over here.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the word Nazi because I recognize that word. That word, it means serpent priest. That word also represented a cult of sorcerers, you see, whose knowledge was based on ancient, you know, traditions of the past. People have even tracked that word back to the Sumerian, to, you know, one of the Sumerian goddesses and her children and so on. So I'm already thinking, well, who's this? Then I already know that the entire so-called Nazi experiment had nothing to do with Germany and Germans. And it's also part of the reason why I despise people who will use that word arbitrarily to signify Germans and Germany. That's absolutely not allowed.
Right.
A Nazi is not necessarily a German. In fact, anyone wants to study, you know, George Bush and his clan will soon find that out.
That's right.
There's more fascists sitting in London and up in Washington than ever has been within the borders of the land of Germany. So, and Israel goes the same. But the thing is that this was a British experiment. And you're absolutely right. When you commit an experiment is not just one experiment. It's subdivided into many experiments. So they wanted to damage the name Arya, which was absolutely necessary. Because you see, too many Victorian scholars from Germany and from Scandinavia and from London, from England, you know, were finding out a lot of what I'm writing about now. They already were getting onto this, and so this could not be. There had to be a wholesale damaging of this term, absolutely, because if it wasn't, then within a very, very short time, during the 1930s, human beings were going to discover that the Western Arya came out of Scandinavia and Ireland and Europe, and literally went as far as where? Well, the north of India, because isn't that where also the word Arya appears?
Right.
So the whole thing, Henrik, would have been out of the bag. The whole thing would have been out of the bag. You wouldn't have to have Michael Tsarion writing about it, in 2007.
Right.
It would have been out of the bag back in 1930. It already was about to get out of the bag. That there was a worldwide order that literally, whether it was on horseback or whether it was by sea, but the fact remains that their symbols of the swastika, which is a symbol that can only be seen in the sky, in the night sky, you see, from the northern climes. Many of the etymologies, many of the traditions. For goodness sake, we're in the era now where they're digging them up. Look at the Padric people and the Tarim Basin people, you see. They're all, with Danish headgear and Nordic features or whatever, the whole thing. Everyone, should know about this.
Right.
So what would have happened in the 1920s and 30s? The fear was great amongst the establishment. So these knights, Nazi knights, who were mostly of, British agents, it's all been exposed. This is what happened. That the name and a lot of the mythologies was contorted into something that would be so radical, so illogical, but literally they could use it in the aftermath. They could use it forever to make sure that nobody ever would dabble in this, because on their chart they have many levels of conspiracy and many levels of cover-up.
Right.
Have many black operations, but they also have a red file. I mean, they've really got a major, for your eyes only file of the most important cover-ups that can never be blown by anyone. And that's one thing that keeps me very positive about the age that we're living in, is that finally we are actually finding out some of this top level. We're sort of cracking the code, and we are going into their sacred cows, and we are going into some taboo areas and exposing it. And this is one of the things that is quite thrilling and inspiring about this age that we're living in.
Indeed, very good. And you also, speaking of going back to the serpent and the connection there, that you also show that the common link between the Western and Eastern schools involves the use of the serpent symbol, and that the symbol of the serpents ultimately refer to the stars and the zodiac. Tell us about that.
It's right. And you're covering, stuff that's been put in the Irish Origins book, and I thank you for that. And you're right. And it's not just the serpent symbol, it's the eagle, with the star, just a very symbol of a star itself. But the serpent is much more important as a study for people who really want to, nail this down, that this global connection between the West and the East, especially in the movement of the elements of civilization from the West to the East. You see, I'm so used to thinking in terms of that, it's difficult for me to, even read people or listen to people who think it's the other way around, as great as their research may be.
Right.
Because immediately, bells just go off in my mind as, why does this person not get this? What the hell does it matter, But then I forget they're coming out of the normal schools, they're coming out of the normal literature, So,
Right.
But that aside, one of the things that really nails this down is the symbol of the serpent. Remember, for a start, that serpents as physical snakes don't exist in Ireland.
That's right, yeah.
That's pretty much a proven fact. Yet the symbol of the serpent is everywhere. My God, you only have to look at the Book of Kells and the ancient manuscripts, and before that, the stones, the images on stones, the images on the ancient monoliths, to see the serpentine symbol all over the place. You only do study Druidism to hear that they spoke of themselves as the adders or as the nadreds. They even used the word Gnadir. Gnadir meant, the men of the serpent.
Mm-hmm.
But then what do we find in the Bible? It just leaps out at me every time, and I have put this into the new Astro Theology book. The terms Christ and the terms Messiah both refer to the serpent, by the way. Most people have understood that the word Christ and the word Messiah means the anointed one.
Right.
Because literally there's pictures showing the anointing. And a scene, the book, the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about it. And for goodness sake, even in the Bible they talk about it. They talk about John the Baptist, initiating Jesus. They talk about Mary, anointing him with oil.
Right.
Basically a decent concordance, a decent Christian concordance will admit that the word Christ probably means the anointed one, or it's a term that basically is similar to Messiah, etc. But what they will never tell you is what's next. Where did the anointing come from? The anointing was an Egyptian ritual that was done on very special initiates of the mystery schools. It was done to the pharaoh, it was done to the princes, it was done to the kings. But the oil that was used in the anointing, Henrik, was the oil of the crocodile god Sobek, or the crocodile of the Nile. They would actually, and that's where the word Messiah comes from. Mesu, which meant also son of, and Messa, M-E-S-S-E-H, like Messa, referred to the crocodile of the Nile and the oil that was made from the body of the crocodile. It was very sacred because it was god Sobek.
Right.
And we have this drink, this soft drink today called Sobe. Right? It's just missing a K at the end, and it also has a reptilian symbol on it. Well, this is the corporations know, but the average listener to the show doesn't know, and better start knowing. Is that this is an old story. You're being anointed when you drink Sobe. Yeah, they love it. You're the Christ now. You're the Messiah. Have a drink.
Right.
But before I get into all that stuff of the corporate world, come back to the idea that the anointing was the oil. But then you take it to the next step. Because these Egyptians weren't pagan madmen who just thought, let's, kill a crocodile, take his fat, and then anoint our kings with it. No.
Right.
It was deeper than that. This crocodile god, the crocodile of the Nile, represented the heavenly crocodile, and this is where the Astro Theology now comes in.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought this up because it's a perfect portrayal. The crocodile represented the crocodile up there, meaning literally in the northern sky there's a constellation that's been known for 25,000 years or more called Draco.
Right.
And it's a very, very, very large constellation that today is known as Draco, the dragon, or the serpent. But the Egyptians looked at it like the lizard of the serpent, the lizard serpent of the Nile, basically the crocodile. So it wasn't that they were initiating the pharaoh based on something to do with a crocodile. It was a symbol. The crocodile and the fat of the crocodile was a symbol for the astrological constellation of Draco, which was always seen as a protector of sacred knowledge. And the reasons why Draco is considered a protector and all of that is in the book. It's an elaborate story about the circumpolar stars and all of that.
Right.
Just in short, when you were there being initiated, and then why do you think it is that afterwards the crown of the pharaoh or the prince is literally what? What does he wear on his head? Haven't people seen it? It's the Uraeus serpent, isn't it?
Ah, yeah, of course, yeah, obviously.
Right, the coronet that you see. Exactly. So this is what he is given as a crown after he's initiated under Draco.
Right.
The pharaoh is now initiated as a master astrologer, a master adept. His tutelary symbol, his emblem has now become the serpent, just like the caduceus is used on the medical corporations, you see. Mm-hmm. And he's now under the serpent. But going back to the original point, this then connects him with the West and Ireland, because that's exactly what the initiates, adepts, magi were called in Ireland. They were called the Nadreds, the serpent people, the serpent priests. So if we happen to have the exact same ritual on two parts of the globe, amongst only royalty and initiated members of mystery schools, this isn't any jack on the street having this happen to them. This is only the very elite.
Right.
And the connecting thread is this Astro Theology and the connection of the northern constellation of Draco. You can throw more books at me that tell that there's no connection between Egypt and Ireland, etc., and it's not going to mean a thing, because the words, the etymology cuts through all that, and the symbolism is where people need to become literate to, because the symbolism in the words is your lifeline. It's your Ariadne's threads through the labyrinth of lies that the historians and the so-called experts have put in front of us.
Right.
So here we have the messiahs of Egypt and the messiahs, plural, of Ireland, and the messiahs of the Babylonians, and the Christs, the Kirsts, the Christs, the Karasts are the serpent ones. They're initiated as astrologers, you see. This is the whole incredible connection here. So when you hear Prince Charles's mother, Queen Elizabeth, in the time of inauguration of her son, saying, by this dragon. Why dragon? Because he's being made Prince of Wales, right? And the Welsh symbol is the dragon.
Right.
But so why is she saying, first of all, why is he sitting on a throne shaped like a dragon? And then she says to him, by this dragon, by this serpent, by the power of this dragon, you are made into the Prince of Wales. You have the power to rule, and your power is given to you by this dragon.
I had no idea.
Is there something that they're saying we're meant to know about here?
I had no idea that she was saying this. I had no idea.
That's right. In the coronation. Of course, you'll not see it because they've edited it. Every little television broadcast of this, they ain't going to show you that.
Yeah.
But believe me, that's what was going on in the full coronation of Prince Charles in Wales. That's why Wales has a dragon symbol. That's why Scotland has a dragon symbol. That's why the Draco, the dragons, the bloodline, all of these terms of the dragon. People have done some marvelous work to show, a certain amount of where this comes from. But they've always tend to leave out, Henrik, the astrological or astromythological story that is lying behind all the texts and lying behind all the scriptures.
That's right. Yeah.
So when you hear Christ talk about he's telling what does he tell his disciples? Be as wise as serpents.
That's right.
Why would he say that? And anyway, what does it mean? Before why he say it, what on earth does it mean to be as wise as a serpent? Well, not the serpent crawling on the floor. The serpents who are standing on two legs.
Right.
The serpents who've been sitting on the thrones of the greatest civilizations on the world. That's what Jesus meant when he's telling his chump disciples, listen, get off your ass, get with this knowledge.
Right.
Be as smart as the most intelligent men of the world. Be as smart as the serpent men, the serpent priest who'd leave you in the dust. Yeah. This is the tutorial. This is the subject matter.
And as you say, it's very important and a very key piece of the puzzle to tie in the Astro Theology here, because again, so many people are very astute to point out the different symbolism around the around the world at this point, that has to do with the serpent and so forth. I mean, that, as you say, it's a very key point and very important. The question that arises also is, where did or those who were looking at the stars to begin with, where did they get these this idea from?
I believe from the West. I believe from this area that we're talking about, that have different names. The Druidic area. I'm going to emphasize the word area was actually the name of Ireland. It wasn't I with an I, Ireland. It was Ari land, the land of the Arya, the noble ones. They get to the east because these tremendous catastrophes ripped the countryside apart, and people can go and just look at that for themselves. If they know how to look at geography, they'll see that the lands of Britain and Scandinavia were torn to shreds. These people were displaced, as we've said. They moved across the land bridges, like we said in previous shows, and they were the Magi. They were basically, if not the creators of many civilizations in the East, they were certainly welcomed guests of those civilizations in the East. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a fanatic. I'm not saying they necessarily created the Babylonian or Sumerian, civilizations, but they certainly would have been very, very much involved in aspects of those civilizations. I mean, to me, I have no problem accepting that they absolutely did create those civilizations. There's a lot of evidence for that. Mm-hmm, yeah. But at the very least, Rick, as far as the Indus Valley goes, as far as the Sumerians go, as far as Babylonian goes, the Medes, I believe that this is basically, you're talking about one global group of theocrats here. Yeah. And it's from them that we get the idea to look to the stars. But there's a psychology behind that, you see. Because just like we said, people today don't really take on board that they have an unconscious mind and that there's so much inner homework to be done. Mm. And they don't take on board the fact that if you don't do that homework, you inevitably breed a world full of deceivers to, create your religions for you on an external way. Hmm. But what also has to be understood is that this psychological understanding is not a new thing. The ancients absolutely did not see the world as being divided like we would do today, in the sense that they taught that there was intimate connections between the psychic world, you see, and the physical world. Physic and psyche were the same. Yeah. There was no division like we've been literally trained to think of the physical world and the inner world of your own mind as two separate things. Yeah. In other words, that there's big differences between the microcosmic realm and the macrocosmic realm. This, of course, was never understood by the ancients. So when they studied the stars, it wasn't like today we would imagine it, which looks almost like a peculiar, if not pseudo-scientific kind of understanding. Right. Well, it's actually our deficit. We are the ones who've got the faulty, distorted, contorted thinking. We think it's mad because we do think of those things as just, material objects out in space. Mm-hmm. We don't know anything about the archetypal realm or these intimate connections between consciousness and matter. But the ancients knew it, and they knew that if you study something external, you are studying yourself. You are studying man. There's no divide or division between it. It's just impossible to accept that, so many civilizations could divide the zodiac into similar, houses. And remember, I'm being quite brief about this. There's many other points of similarity. the symbols of the constellations, worshipping the same stars for the same reasons, etc. You find all of this. So you could accept that, all of this happened what's called autochthonously, meaning individually per nation, per cult. But I think that the chances of that, just from a pure point of probability, is so astronomical, it couldn't be the truth. Logically, it could. The reason is that one elite group, like the trickle-down theory, that this was the way that the great magi understood the stars. This was their particular syllabus, and then this syllabus was then transplanted and copied and emulated and eventually, of course, corrupted by these different cults and these different churches and these different nations. That's the way to look at it.
If we take into account here also the by now very known theory of diffusionism, the seas are open roads to travel, there's a very clear and easy connection between the probably back then a global seafaring people that again obviously were looking for the stars because that's the place where you navigate from, or you navigate via the stars, and there's also the possibility that the most clear connection between, first of all, why they were looking at the stars to begin with, but also that this was a global civilization, and they obviously discovered the zodiac through looking at the stars, and this was transplanted globally. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, no question about it in my mind. And all I would add to that is that there's two things. One is that the intelligence level of those people can now not be doubted. So let's cast away this derogatory, denigrating feeling that these people were just, barbarians. Right. Because anyone who could navigate the high seas, anyone who could demarcate the zodiac, anyone who could know that much about the behavior of certain stars and constellations, let's go even further, anyone who could calculate precession of the equinoxes here, my God, what are we talking about? We're talking about scientists' incredible intelligence, the Naros cycle, the Sothic cycle, the famous, what's the other one, the Saros cycle. We're talking about cycles that last multi-thousands of years.
Yeah.
But you see, you used the word navigate. Navis, that comes from novice, N-A-V-I-S. What do you think a novice is in the church? What do you think a sexton is, or a minister, or a magistrate, or a nun, or a monk, or a master, or a minister? You see, or a monastery. My God, we're knee-deep in Astro Theology when you really get into what's going on here. Yeah. The navigators, the novice, the ones who measure God, right? Measure the stars, watch the rising and the setting of the sun. This is picked up in the Christian world, if people only know how to read the signs and look at the etymology and so on. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. This fusion is worldwide, and this is one. Remember, I said the red file, some of the stuff that is on the top of the list of what the human race should never ever find out about. Indeed, this diffusionism is one of those things. That's why they will rather pay PhDs and give them their budgets to run around and not answer questions. And even if they then have to answer a question, they'll do so in a way that creates 100 other questions. This is what they'll do. Because the last thing you can find out about is the reason why there's cocaine in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs is because there was a connection between South America and Egypt.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, what a thunder, thunder has struck, lightning has flashed. We can't accept it. It's too immense. Listen.
Yeah.
Of course, then they're going to think people like myself are crazy when we talk about Atlantis and Lemuria. I mean, look at the world we're living in, Henrik. Yeah. Look how primitive people are in their mind.
Astrology is not mere fortune telling. Is it in evidence in today in other areas as well?
Astrology and evidence is everywhere. In fact, that's probably one of the reasons why I personally got into this subject myself, is through studying ancient art. Medieval, Renaissance art. I think on a previous show we even talked about Botticelli's Venus, the famous painting of Botticelli's Venus.
Yeah.
But it's not the only one. From Giotto, from the pre-Renaissance period, you see all the way down through into the neoclassical works of Nicolas Poussin. Basically the whole of art, the whole of pictorial art is absolutely loaded. I'm thinking even of Albrecht Dürer, the great German artist.
Yeah.
He left clues, astro-theological, astro-mythological clues throughout his art. We know that Nicolas Poussin did. We know that Leonardo da Vinci in the Middle Ages did. We have Giotto, we have Cimabue. So we've got a welter of information coming out of the Botticellis, you see. All the way down through the great art, you keep seeing these astrological motifs, and you see these pagan motifs. The Bible. We were talking about the Bible. This new Astro Theology book goes heavily into the Astro Theology connections to the Bible. That Jesus is the Sun God, the Sun King. Mm-hmm. That his mother Mary, is clearly a representation of the constellation of Virgo. And near Virgo rises a constellation known as Butes. And Butes was always considered a male, god or a male character. Mm-hmm. Because wherever you see Virgo rising, this Butes will also rise with Virgo. So that was Joseph in the Bible. Because wherever Mary was in the sky, Butes, was nearby.
Followed, yeah.
So, it was the rising and setting of these constellations. Jesus was the sun because, of course, the sun in Egypt opened in the new year. The new year of the Egyptians opened in the sign of Virgo. Mm-hmm. So this is what the connection was between the young sun in the arms of the Virgin. The three wise men who visit, Jesus Christ in the Nativity story, and people who've seen my DVD will know that, I've covered all of this in the DVD. The three wise men, of course, were the stars of the constellation of Orion. Yeah, yeah. The three famous stars that are absolutely side by side in the sky. The four animals around the cradle of Jesus happen to represent the four cardinal points. The very archangels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The very symbols that Christianity has assigned to them are astrological. They represent the cardinal points, etc. Yeah. The 40 days in their wilderness. I've got a 5-hour DVD, as you said, out there. We cover so many of these parts of Scripture, not just of Christianity, but of others as well. Going into how, and remember, Christianity is not just drawing on the stellar cult, it's drawing on all the cults. It's a book full of information from the lunar cult, from the solar cult, from the Saturnian cult, from the volcano cult. We got all of the cults' symbolism and traditions represented in the Bible. But that 40 days in their wilderness, you see, comes out of the idea that the sun spans about 30 degrees in each sign. Right. And when it passed through the sign of Cancer, because it doesn't have a lot of bright stars, was always referred to in the astrological canon as the wilderness, you see. So this is why you find this term, And then, of course, the famous adversaries. Wherever there's a solar hero, you've got his enemy, be it Herod, or be it the Philistines, you see, or be it Judas, right? Or whoever, all the adversarial characters that turn up in the Bible also have their astrological counterparts. So it's all there in the Bible. But again, I find in my audience particularly, there's a lot of interest of how astrotheology turns up in the modern world, like in architecture. The churches, the synagogues, the state flags, the emblems, the heraldry, even in the design of cities, is tremendously based on astrology. This is starting to come out now. City squares, civic buildings, not to mention clock towers, fountains, bridges, embankments. If your eyes are half open, you see, and you really go around with educated eyes, you're going to start seeing something that's going to leave you in no doubt that these cults are anything but a relic of the past, That's right. And there's something interesting as well, that each sign of the zodiac, and I mean the 12 famous signs, and also there are others. I talk about these other signs that should be known. I actually talk about them in the DVD also, and they turn up a lot in the corporate symbols, but let's leave that aside. Basically, each sign of the zodiac was also given to a portion of the earth. Did you know that? That each sign of the zodiac had a terrestrial counterpart. So England, Scotland, Wales, all of these locations on our planet Earth were actually assigned to different constellations of the zodiac. And even they went even further than that. Even certain boroughs, even certain towns, they'd subdivide it. For instance, London is divided into 28 boroughs. Mm-hmm. 28 is the number of lunar mansions. Oh. It's based on lunar divisions, yeah. Right. So the whole of London is based on this. So you might even have a city or a state that is ruled over by more than one constellation or more than one sign. Now you won't know that, but you might be working around. You might be walking around in a borough of London. You might be walking around in Hayward, California, or Palo Alto, right, or wherever in America, without the faintest idea that around you is stellar symbols, not only on the corporations but in the city squares. You might be walking around Stanford. You might be walking around the Hoover Institute. You might be walking around San Francisco without the faintest idea that you're walking in a terrestrial map that is based on a celestial map,
Right.
but it's in concrete. Yeah, David Oveson found this out when he started researching the architecture of Washington, D.C., that the entire Washington, D.C. is designed based on, the movements of the planets, of the star Sirius. And the whole architecture, as people now must know, I hope they know, is incredibly based on this old Masonic geometry. But you've got to go beyond that. It's not just Masonic. It's astrotheological.
That's right.
There's a reason why these people are based in the stars. Andrew Power, my friend in Ireland, discovered that when he started researching the Battle of the Boyne. To discover that there's not a single bullet or belt buckle to be found. This is a zone where there's meant to have been a war, for goodness sake. And not a single relic of war exists. The man found out that, hold on, the whole so-called Battle of the Boyne that's written up in so many histories of Ireland was a ritual battle based on the movement of Jupiter, movement of Saturn, movement of the Sun, moving in connection with the Milky Way. It was a ritual of handing over. One dragon bloodline, namely the Stuarts, were performing a ritual that involved hundreds of people down near Tara. It was actually very, very close to Newgrange. It was on the river because the river on Earth represents the Milky Way. The river on Earth also represents the Eridanus, which is a celestial river, a constellation up there near Taurus and Gemini. You see, so the king's horse going into the water. At the Washington Monument, don't you see the long strip of water in Washington, D.C.?
Indeed.
Yeah. Isn't the Houses of Parliament beside the River Thames?
Yeah.
Isn't Paris the government beside the river? Isn't in Dublin the four courts on the river Liffey? What's going on here? And the river Liffey comes from the word Lifa, life, meaning, the goddess of life. There's all pagan symbolism you got going there.
Right.
And the river is always running alongside because this is a heavenly river. So people are walking around in the delirium not even aware of all of this astrotheology that is completely surrounding them. These characters had a habit of breaking the zodiac down into 36 houses, you see. Those symbols are always around in our society. I see them in corporate products and even in the architecture. There was 72 other constellations in and around the astrological belt, Henrik. All of those have symbols that people don't know about. So you may be familiar with Leo the lion, yeah, and you may know Aries, because people wear a chain around their neck. They think they know about astrology. It's really fun. Okay, so you know the 12 signs. Do you know that there's 72 other signs that are used every day? By the corporate giants.
That's right.
And the media outlets and on products. And you don't know that this is astrology right in front of your eyes. Think of Madison Avenue. Think of Columbia Pictures. The woman with the sun above her head and the moon under her feet. Every Catholic will understand what I've just said there. The woman who's radiant with the sun above her head and the moon under her feet and the crown of 12 stars. Everyone knows that's a symbol of Virgin Mary. What's that symbol doing as Columbia Pictures then? I ask you, the logo.
Right.
Paramount, the mountain. Do you know that we're talking about the sun in Virgo when you're looking at that corporate logo? Do you know what TriStar is the famous winged horse of Cancer and also Pegasus? Do you know MGM is the famous lion of Leo, you see? Or Orion, Disney, Touchstone. Let's go on. In the DVD I've gone into this.
Yeah.
Astrotheology. You're asking where it is, Henrik? Where isn't it?
It's incredible. And what comes to mind is also, of course, from the famous prayer that as it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. That this is about taking what is in heaven and bringing it down to earth, replicating it, and that this is and has been in the past, I guess, an important ritual on many levels. And one, of course, is being that this is a veneration, I guess, to the stars, that we're acknowledging that what we're seeing up there is something that we can, we're replicating it down here. So I mean, in a sense, that this to me also doesn't mean that this doesn't mean that it's evil. It doesn't mean that that these people are they're doing it because they want to use black magic on you. This is it's connected with so much more. But we first of all have to become aware of it. That's the number one point here.
Well, exactly. And remember, what does it say on the cover of the DVD and the book? Astro Theology. The word theology appears in the term.
Right.
Because it isn't black magic, it isn't evil, it's theology. But it's astro-theology. This is all, this is where we need to move the human race forward. This is your original theology. This was the original church. This was the original temple. This was the original chapel, cathedral. the temple of God. It all came from there. So, we're at the moment where we can start discovering the roots. So I've been saying it for as long as I can remember that by coming to the 21st and 21st and 22nd centuries, we are in fact coming full circle to something. But full circle to what? Full circle to discovering where it all began,
So if we veer away a little bit from that area and talk a little bit about monotheism, making all of this, all the numbers of different things we have out there, either if we talk about God or the stars or the planets or what have you, monotheism did not begin with Christianity. It officially began, as you've pointed out many times on the show, of course, that it began with Akhenaten, and you've written extensively on this pharaoh and on his era in your book on Ireland. But what would have caused, his avid worship of the sun? What caused him to abandon the egalitarian attitudes of the rest of the Egyptians?
That's a good point. And again, we can split hairs a little bit there. It didn't even really begin with Akhenaten, The monotheism was there a little bit before him. To be really strict about it, Thutmose III, and very even possibly Amenhotep II, But Amenhotep II, I think, was such a lunatic. You can't really date anything from him. So people tend to think it was Thutmose III, is more of a sure bet.
Mm-hmm.
Now you see that what we have to really remember is that all the way down until Akhenaten, officially everyone worshipped Amun-Ra. But that is like, saying to everybody in England, you officially accept that the Queen is, the Queen.
Right.
They're going to go, yes. But secretly they may think she's all right, whatever, right?
Right.
And they, think, well, hell yeah, but I don't believe in her or whatever, So this is what you have to understand. It was just politically correct because Amun was the god of Egypt. He was the, the tutelary god of Egypt. So everybody basically said, yes to Amun-Ra.
Mm-hmm.
Just like later on the Greeks, you couldn't say no to Jupiter, otherwise you'd find yourself in very hot water. But as long as you said yes to Jupiter, they basically didn't mind what else you did.
Right.
Jupiter's day, as long as you laid a few laurel leaves at Jupiter's thing, and by the way, this was the law, this was Roman law, that all the Roman states, you see, no matter where they were, even Cleopatra had to do it. Just go and lay a few bloody leaves at Jupiter's, statue there, and, the Romans couldn't care less what you do. It was somewhat the same way in Egypt. As long as you officially, and the pharaoh, of course, had to. The pharaoh was a representative of Amun. So on paper, absolutely on paper, Amun-Ra was the number one big cheese. But you see, personally speaking, in these families themselves, they had personal gods. And I would say that towards the Thutmoside dynasties leading up to Akhenaten, I believe that these Thutmoside 18th dynasty pharaohs, they personally couldn't care less about Amun-Ra or his priests.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what eventually led to the more worship of Aton. This is what it's all about. But to answer your question specifically, absolutely. Akhenaten was the man who basically turned Egypt upside down. He openly and drastically changed the worship. He forbade the worship of other religions. He totally forbade the worship of Amun-Ra and all the other gods. He stopped funding the priests. He came up with Aton as the number one god, you see.
Mm.
He moved the capital, all sorts of extremist things that he did. And he then began to exclude so much, because monotheism is nothing but exclusion. It's excluding other gods. It's not saying there is only one God. That's what Christians think, you're saying.
Mm.
But no, Christians have to understand that monotheism is merely the exclusion of all other gods. But you're still accepting that those other gods exist. Which is my point to Christians, is why don't you study it? Why don't you study these things? No, I'm not telling you to give up your Christianity or your monotheism, but why don't you just accept that there were other religions that are very interesting and that, may have a tremendous meaning for your own beliefs and your religion. Stop thinking of it all as evil.
Right.
But to get back to your question, the reason why Akhenaten would have wanted to do this, what his real motive was, I believe, was insanity. Because the more that I've studied it, and of course, remember, I do have, the work of Sigmund Freud in front of me and stuff like that, so maybe I am partial or whatever.
Right.
But I am one of the few authors you see who doesn't lionize Akhenaten.
Right.
Maybe I'm one of only 2 or 3 in the world who's written on this subject that simply does not fall into lockstep with everyone else thinking that he was just the greatest Christ before the Christ, the greatest light the world has ever known before Christianity. All of this nonsense. The man was a psychopath. You only have to read it. And by the way, this is corroborated by modern-day reports from psychologists of people who would act in that way, people who would only worship the light, who don't recognize the darkness, who recognize shadow, who basically, are pathologically afraid of that. That's well known to psychologists today to be a form of pathology in which the person is so divorced, you see, from their own unconscious mind, from their own inner drives and so on, that they basically live in a super lit fluorescent, Margaret Thatcher is a perfect example. The woman only slept, by her own admission, like 2 to 3 or 4 hours a night. She never slept ever more than 4 hours a night. And by the way, she always slept with the light on.
Really?
Yep. So that's just one example. There's many other corporate jacks who operate in this way. So it's a well-known thing. So we're dealing with a psychopath, but unfortunately he had a crown on his head, just like the psychopaths today have a crown on their head, or the ring of the fisherman on their little pinky or whatever. Slippers. We're still dealing with the same maniacs today.
Yeah.
And they've created a super lit, fluorescent, toxic world, because they're all children of Akhenaten. They're all children of Aton. Believe me, right down to the last one. Even the ones who don't know that they are, who don't think of any of this stuff. But unfortunately, this is what he did. And, it ties into, well, see, let's look at it this way. Akhenaten was so deranged, right, that even his own father, Amenhotep III, didn't even want Akhenaten does not appear in any of the not photographs, but any of the wall drawings or etchings, you see,
right,
with the royal family. His own father certainly did not want him to be around. And there's no doubt in my mind that his father did not want him to be the next pharaoh. The next pharaoh was going to be a brother of Akhenaten, but that guy died when he was very, very young. And he died mysteriously. So we could have some intrigue there. We're not sure of that, because there's no evidence for any foul play. But the fact of the matter is that the younger brother, whose name was Thothmosis also, he died, and it left the way open for the Akhenaten to be made into the pharaoh. Reports also say that he had trouble speaking, just like the Bible talks about Moses having a speech impediment, so he had to have Aaron be his mouthpiece. Well, since we know now through the work of so many, not so many, but from Ellis and Mustafa Gadala and from Ahmed Osman, that we now know that Moses and Akhenaten were the same man, just like so many people like Sigmund Freud had already tried to say this. Does that then imply that Akhenaten couldn't speak the language of the normal Egyptians, that he literally was not native himself, or that even if he was native, he spent so much time with foreigners within the borders of Egypt that even when he came to be the pharaoh, he wasn't even clued in. He was they say he had a speech impediment. Could it not mean that he actually literally couldn't even speak in the dialogue or the language of the native Egyptians? So we got a lot of questions about his loyalty and his patriotism to the country. But the bottom line is psychological. The man was a psychopath, and this worship of the sun needs to be approached from that point of view as well. If we can't see it in today's world, that this Luciferianism, this worship of the sun, is psychopathic, maybe we can see it when we look into the historical figures like Akhenaten to see that there's nothing natural about it. And did you know that in the last month, Henrik, new discoveries, new digs, there's been excavations at Amarna. This is the great city of the sun that Akhenaten built. Right. Which has always been put forward. And I really want to emphasize this, because this place, this Amarna, has been put in books from the 1800s onwards as the great capital of light, the great holy city that Akhenaten built. Now they dug the place up physically, and they're finding corpses, they're finding poverty, they're finding people who died in agony, they're finding huddled bodies and all sorts of, debris. And they're finding out the place was a frickin' toilet, man. It's a grim, fear-ridden hellhole. Yeah. I didn't make this up. I've got, it's on the blog. It's on my forum. Right. They found the evidence. But before, they're going to tell you, so suddenly it turns out to be Stephen Kingville, but before it was the heavenliest place on earth. I better stop talking about the subject.
Very interesting. So this is very recent findings, you say?
Within the last couple of weeks, believe me, it's fresh off. They've been digging the place up, and I bet you they've been hoping that they're going to find, all the evidence to show what a great darling of God this Akhenaten was. Right. Well, to their shock, amazement, horror, they're climbing over bodies that look awful. That there's completely evidence that shows that the place was, horrible, and it was people were in agony. They were unhappy. They were not feeling at home. All the evidence has been discovered. Big shock, Well, listen. Psychopath opens his playpen. What do you think is going to happen? Norman Bates opens a motel. You want to go and stay there? Oh, go ahead. Don't come dead in the morning.
Yeah. That's a good point. And of course, you mentioned an important word there, Lucifer or Luciferian. In your work, you talk about this. A disciple of light is a Luciferian, and Akhenaten was a chief Luciferian. Then maybe we can say his atonism was Luciferian, and therefore Christianity, or the outgrowth of Akhenaten's monotheism, should really be thought of as atonism and therefore Luciferian, right?
You bet. And if only the world would get that, because when it's fully understood, when what you've just said there is fully understood, deeply and reverently, with understanding, not just prejudicial knee-jerk reaction, but intellectually understood, what is light, what is Luciferianism, and we've got information. We've got information on that. We'll put the links up, hopefully, on our this Red Ice page.
Right.
Of this interview, and people are welcome to go and make a detailed study of the links we'll put up that have links to the real meaning of Lucifer. We've even done a previous show, you and I, on Lucifer, where
indeed
we examine some of the different roots or origins or whatever of that. And see, maybe old Akhenaten, can't totally be blamed. Maybe his clan of sun worshippers can't be blamed, because after all, what are we talking about? We're talking about 1400 years BC. Well, what was going on 10,000 years before that?
Catastrophe.
Worldwide global catastrophe.
Right, yeah.
Possibly even 50,000 years ago. But, we can't be sure when we look far back. But we know that sometime back in history, between 13,500 BC and about 50,000 years BC, there was catastrophes of such enormity. And one of those catastrophes was what? I've talked about it in my first book on Atlantis, the destruction of the second sun.
Yeah.
I must say that wasn't a sun. It was a large planet known as, and by the way, one of the names of it was Lucifer. Another name was Tiamat. Another name was Marduk.
Yeah.
Another name was Rahab. With this great 12th planet in our solar system was destroyed, people always thought it was a sun. When that sun, think of the psychology when you see the sun destroyed. Isn't the one sun that now is called Sol, because Sol means solitary, he's the alone one in the sky.
Yeah.
Aren't you going to be, if you think the sun is a god, you didn't think he was a god, you knew that he wasn't a god. They worship the deity through the sun. Nobody in the pagan times believed the stars were gods. That needs to be totally cleared up. But just for argument's sake here, obviously the sun is the bringer of life. One sun is already gone. What's to stop the other one from blowing up? And what happens when light does disappear? What do you have?
Darkness.
Right. So if a person then becomes pathologically, or if a people become pathologically afraid of darkness, it could be for a very physiological reason. If the physical sun has left you and been destroyed, and you are now surrounded by darkness, your psychology will in fact change. And your prayers to the one sun that's left, hey buddy, don't go out, please don't leave us,
right,
is going to literally become a religion, a theology, won't it? Because it's born out of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I've basically said in my work that almost everything that man does is born out of trauma.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Here we have now a perfect, focal. We focused in on one particular area. That maybe these religions and these potentates did have a bugbear about this, because they were so afraid of darkness. They literally were afraid that the light of the day, the light of the morning, would go out. And so that every time it arose on the eastern horizon was a day for jumping out of bed and just going out there and celebrating, and praying to the sun and bowing down and all the rest of it.
Well, I mean, I just want to interject there. We can even, I guess, squeeze in here the if we look at some of the South American cultures like the Maya, Aztecs, so forth. Again, possibly that might be a reason for some of the sacrifice that went on there, in veneration of the sun. This one shouldn't, die. The last one we have left, we need to sacrifice people, day after day, continuous the stream, who knows?
Wouldn't people be already sacrificed if the sun didn't rise?
Of course, they would die.
Everything would die within a very short period of time, and these ancients knew that. And since one sun had it literally exploded in the sky, and all sorts of trauma had come out of that, it doesn't really, I don't find it far-fetched at all to think that the adoration of the sun would replace a more balanced, egalitarian worship of other planets, other stars, the normal astrotheologies of the normal priest cults that used to exist, where every body, every orb, every body in the sky was, given incredible kudos and incredible attention to detail.
Right.
But if some great tragedy had taken place, eventually the sun cults would have said, listen, the sun is more important. The sun is more important. And from that point, you see, things may have developed. I mean, again, I'm speculating, but when we're looking into the origins of the psychopathy now, we do have to look back to the fact of these catastrophes, and that maybe there was a sort of a warped method in the apparent madness, the solar fixation, what is called the solar fixation. And psychologists know, don't they, that in order to prevent yourself becoming sick, you make yourself sicker psychologically. That's what repression is. That's what a lot of these psychological problems arise from, is not trying to continually do things that make you sick. Most psychological problems come out of trying to make yourself well.
Right.
But in a wrong way.
Interesting.
So again, Akhenaten may have thought he was onto something here.
Yeah.
And had no time for all this other malarkey, with Osiris and vegetable cults and underworld cults and stuff like that. He was thinking, the sun is what it's all about. And, that's a very, very powerful, you can turn that into some real powerful theology if you know how to do it right. But coming back to your main point, absolutely, Luciferianism, what Christians know as Luciferianism, they have to realize that their own religion has been created by Luciferians. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely worth thinking about that one, because again, I was reading this pamphlet from a local church around here, and again, it was all about, and this was, I think, around springtime, and it was all about the light. They of course refer to it as the Christ light, or the light of Christ. But again, it's the same. It's the illumination, the Illuminati, the Luciferianism, and again, that doesn't mean, just because we say Luciferianism, that doesn't again connotate that this is an evil thing, but it says what the word means. It's about light. Right. It's about
the theology of light. It's a specific kind of worship. There's no difference between that word and Christianity. There's no difference in that word than Atonism. In fact, there's even probably more accuracy in the word Luciferianism than there is Christianity and there is in Atonism. The word Luciferian is probably even a better word to use, talking about it etymologically, for sure. Because that's what the Bible is full. And I have lists and lists and lists in the book of biblical passages, just like the one you quoted, that are talking about that God is light, God is light, God is light. It's all about light. Well, why don't people think about that for a moment and get into it and analyze and discover what this whole concept means, and then look around the world today and see how many symbols of the sun and how many other, solar symbols you see.
Yeah.
Like the eye, the eye of Ra, whatever, are all around in our world today. There's something going on.
Definitely is. Okay, so that's the, we know that the solar cults obviously is there. Their mark is, very clear throughout society. Were there other cults, before this one, the main one, popped up?
Yeah, there was. Yes, the solar cult is basically an outgrowth of several other cults. The most important one being the stellar cult. And the book I'm writing, the Astro Theology book, is chiefly about the stellar cult and what they believed, what they were into, and what they taught, both in Ireland and in Amanist Egypt. But there was also the lunar cult. This is a very, very, very important cult for one important reason, and that's the Old Testament. The Old Testament Jehovah can be traced back to the main god of the lunar cult. This can be done, but the lunar cult, the letter of our alphabet, the letter C and the letter U, represent the moon. That's because they're shaped like the crescent moon, you see.
Of course.
Yeah. The number 14, the number 28, certain numbers that we saw. The number 7, for instance, the famous number 7 is partly a lunar number. We find lunar crescents on all the Islamic flags, don't we?
Yeah.
What is that? What's that all about? They're meant to be a solar cult worshipping a solar god, but their old flags have crescent moons on them and stars on them. That's again the point, that these old cults predate the new cults, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But right down to music, the musical keys, which were based on the movement of the planets, the alphabetical letters and vowels, especially the sacred vowels, were all dedicated to certain planets by these cults. Architecture reveals it. You know, the shape of the mosque, the design of certain temples, people's daily rituals, the calendrical ceremonies of the calendar.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. I mean, even right down to games that we play, you know, like Snakes and Ladders and Hopscotch and all of these things. They all go back to this, you know. Like I said, the titles that the clergy use, you know, minister, monk, magistrate, all of these very famous, you know, deacon.
Yeah.
All of these terms come from these various cults, not one cult, but from many. But the sad thing is, you see, that the stellar cult was the great cult that had lasted for thousands of years, and all these other cults are basically colleges within the larger college. Just like in a school, you can have fraternities.
Right.
Or in schools in England, you have what's called houses in a school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly what this was. All the other cults were subdivided cults of the greater stellar cult. They all answerable. They all borrowed and cannibalized the symbols of the stellar cult. And it's the stellar cult that really interests me more than anything else, because that's where so many of our traditions come from. But the sad thing is that the true teachings of the stellar cult were already lost long before even the time of Plato. Can you imagine? So when we're looking to Plato's time and even Pythagoras' time, you know, people look to these guys as if there's something so special, so holy. It's like, hang on, you know, some of the bunk that these people believed. I mean, isn't it Plato? No, I'm serious. Plato and Pythagoras fall into the old stellar cult, fall into the old solar cult concept that the earth and matter is negative and spirit is up there somewhere and it's positive. They're already dealing with a dualism in their philosophy, which already shows you they're miles away from understanding, you see, the true tenets of theology. During the time of Plato, they already believed that, you know, my God, that the earth was what? A cylinder. Yeah, did you know that? They actually believed that the earth was cylindrical shaped, or maybe, you know, a flat.
Really?
Yeah, they thought echo was a devil shouting back at you. Come on, Henry.
That's interesting.
They believed that headless men in Africa were walking around with an eye in their chest.
Okay.
At the time of Herodotus. The great historian Herodotus, the great Greeks, the fantastic, the Romans, yeah. These are the guys who are telling you that there's headless men in Africa. All men in Africa are headless with an eye in the middle of their chest, for goodness sake. That echoes, yeah, and the demons can cause, you know, pregnancy to a woman. Watch out.
Oh, well, okay,
so
yeah.
We're already, you know, it's not that, oh my goodness, you know, the stellar cult. Their teachings were already contaminated and perverted and defaced by the time we've even got to the Greeks. And it's from the Greek time that we're looking back where we have this imaginary, fallacious, erroneous idea that, oh, those silly pagans believed that the sun and the stars were gods. They knew they were not. They knew that God is something else. And in fact, this is what I talk about heavily in the new book, is also about the true theology. What was the teachings of the Arya, the teachings of the Magi? What were they? What was all this about? What was it all about? What was all of the looking at the stars and all the mathematical computations, you know? What was it all about? Was it about men who were divorced from themselves, or was it about man studying himself? What is the difference between those cults today, of the yesteryear, who knew that there was no division between matter and consciousness, and that nature was certainly not lower but was also spiritual? Because if you believe, as the ancient stellar cult and the ancient Druids did believe, that spirit is everywhere, there's no such thing as a material world trapping any soul or anything like that. Isn't that different than the Christianity we have today? Because if everything is spirit, then how can matter be trapped in spirit? I mean, in other words, if there is no such thing as matter, and everything is a version of spirit, how can spirit trap spirit? You see, it becomes a paradox.
Yeah.
So you have people who are not looking to that. You don't have people who believe in a hell. And you don't have people who believe in a malignancy of matter.
Right.
And we, in our age, is going to have to get back to that understanding very, very quickly if there's meant to be any kind of survival. Because we have people, all the things that, for instance, let me be brutal about it, everything that Monsanto and all of these corrupt corporations are doing today has a philosophy behind it. The philosophy that nature is just something foreign, and lower and manipulatable and reduplicatable and,
improvable.
Provable, exactly, and it has nothing to do with you. Your body is certainly not part of nature, and your mind is not part of nature, and ergo, all of these people who are deluded in the same psychopathic way are now ready to bring the world to the brink of annihilation and man to the brink of insanity. It's happening right as we speak, and its roots are ancient. Its roots go back all the way.
Very
But yes, there
interesting
were
point,
plenty
yeah.
of other cults before the solar cult. And the Bible is their manifesto. Their Bible is literally as garbled as it is the testament of all of these different cults of the ancient world.
Right. It's a I guess a mishmash in a way. It's put everything together in one, and again it's that idea of well, it's mono, it's one, it's uno, it's bringing all of the previous things into one worshipable religion. It's the same reflection that this is supposed to be one mono.
And don't we have that? Haven't we got that mantra today in the world of the corporations, in the terms of politics and global government? Oneness.
Right. Yeah.
First
Exactly.
they're talking about diversity with one breath, but we already know they're talking about global and oneness and unification. These are old terms. These are not something that's just dreamt up in the last 30 years.
That's right. That's a very good point. Very good point. Globalization, and even again, if we return to the idea of the New Age movement and criticize that a little bit, that's the same thing there. That all is one. I mean, in a sense, what we have been talking about is that is true, because what you just referred to was that spiritually, if everything is spirit, so obviously it all is one. But at the same time, it's on the same route or same path of the monotheistic, idea that everything is one and should be one, and there's really no difference. And I personally don't agree with that. I think there's diversity in the world,
Exactly, and let's be very specific about it, so the listeners really grasp this paradox, or let's put it better, they can untwist the paradox. You untwist the paradox of this oneness lie by realizing what I've said on previous shows about just because you want to edit reality doesn't mean that there is in fact a one-season world. The oneness that these people are talking about, these globalists, is a oneness of exclusion. Remember we talked about Akhenaten being an excluder, or
Right.
monotheism being an excluder?
Right.
So what we're dealing with here is a painstaking process of exclusion in order to make this oneness. It's not a true oneness, it's a manufactured oneness. The spiritual oneness of what you're talking about is utterly, completely different. If we want to explore that just in a couple of sentences, the spiritual oneness is only available or only perceivable to a person who is an individual, meaning one.
Right.
But it's a oneness that is not the oneness that is, hey, I've taken all these pieces and I've clumped them all together. Look at my paper mache monster here.
Right,
it's one.
Right.
It's Quatermass, and we got all the little entities all massing up and gluing themselves together into one hideous monster. There's your oneness.
Yeah, indeed. I mean,
that is oneness, but that's the Frankensteinian horror story of the Night of the Zombies, where everybody is one clump, one consciousness, one big amorphous nothing, but in one place or in one sphere collected. All the emptiness, all the criminality, all the toxicity, all the stupidity, all the sensuality, all the narcissism, all nicely packaged and nicely delivered on a plate to you, by the world system, and
Right.
presented with a nice big package of oneness that is anything but the oneness of the other spiritual kind. So we're in a one-season world of edited reality. And because, as Sigmund Freud and everybody pointed out, reality itself is one of the most painful things for this human mind you see as a child. Remember we talked about how infantile people are emotionally and psychologically? I said they may be developed technologically and intellectually, but they're arrested emotionally. Well, now we can add to that more sense. We can clarify what I meant by that. Is that, you see, the infantile person can't be an individual. He can't perceive reality directly. Reality is incredibly frightening to that fragile, mind, type of mind. So you have to manufacture a kind of reality. You literally create what's called a simulacra.
Right.
And you create a sampled, just like a machine can sample music.
Right.
So that you can't even tell the difference if it's a real violin or a real harp or a real oboe. People in musicals who do musical sampling know this.
Right.
And the idea is to get it as perfect as possible. And you can now get the sample so perfect that a whole orchestra could be playing and you wouldn't even know it's some guy on a keyboard doing it.
Indeed.
So this is exactly what the mind, the ego, is all about. The ego, the impresario, and the people we have in power are sampling reality. And within that sampled, wholly artificial reality, they start clipping, because in order to create that sample, you still need some sort of channel or pipeline to the real. You don't want to, but you have to because you're sampling. You have to have your little MIDI digital connector. As the little tabernacle, your little idea of reality, the little sphere of the simulacra becomes absolutely wall-to-wall perfect. I mean, you've got all the furniture in there. It's all, you've read all the Japanese manuals and everything is in perfect position. Everything's working. And all the remote controls, all 30 of them are lying on the table. Everything's under control. You can turn the lights on. You can dim them. You can open the fridge door. You can say lights go on and they go on. Once you have that entire solient green world working for you there, you see, don't need those ties to the real world.
Right.
And Henrik, we're living in the 21st century, and the countdown to 2012, where the snippers are out. The actual cable cutters are now clipping one by one all the connectors to the real world.
Yeah.
And you're going to live in the sanitized, completely anesthetized, artificial little solient green reality. But it's got a big, big sign over the door to make you happy. Oneness. Smile, obey.
Right.
You're under control. Be okay, So this is the thing that I'm talking about. Now, in that realm, you have the oneness. But the real oneness is a totally remote, different thing. That first you have to be an individual to be able to understand.
The oneness that I feel is what we are a part of every day. The universe in itself, it's a oneness. What we are being part of on this planet, all the thing that's happening. We are already one. We don't need to go into a fake oneness or a simulation of that oneness, but that is what is happening right now. And I mean, again, it's if we follow the trend and look at some of the technological advancements to connect this idea again here. Just the other day, Matrix-style worlds are just, a few years away. I mean, they're getting there. They're so close now,
See, like I said, it comes back to exclusion. To live in the real world, exclusion doesn't work. You have to be holistic. You have to understand the hierarchy. You have to see the ugliness in the beauty and the beauty in the ugliness. You see, it's a different kind of thinking. It's a different kind of organic process that relates to the real world.
Right.
The mind can choose not to be real. It can choose to get into all sorts of analog states. And therefore, you don't need that in the analog world. You see, in this simulacra, you don't require all of this real interaction with reality because reality has basically traumatized you. So in the real world, there's less chance for exclusion. There's more likelihood. The reality pulls you to be, more understanding in a true and organic way. Whereas the other world doesn't ask you to do anything like that. It asks you to conform and to routine and to have rhythms and to have reduplicatable realities. This is the difference.
Right. Michael. So let's backtrack a little bit again and go over a few more points that we want to bring up here. Most of the major solar cults gods were transplanted from the West, from Ireland, as you've been writing about. Is this what you believe, Michael?
Yeah, this is, I think the theme of a lot of my work in the Irish origins concept is that even the gods, the pantheons themselves, not just the astrology, and again I emphasize, you see, that it's much easier to see the stars of the northern hemisphere from northern climes, after all. And many of even the etymological terms for the star signs, particularly the word Arcadia, you see, the Arcadians actually refer to the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians can be tracked to Scotland and to Ireland. And they were the great navigators, the great astronomers. So I actually believe that astrology as a science / navigation is a Northwestern invention.
Right. And
I believe that time will hold me out. And then, of course, when you start to want to tell the story of the zodiac, it becomes difficult to people who are not familiar. So you create what's called astro mythology. You create the characters of the gods, that later become the gods and the heroes. But that's a story, and the ancient people always knew it was a story. They didn't believe that, the constellation of Orion was really a god, called Osiris.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It wasn't like that at all. But yeah, the movement was from the west to the east. There's many indications of this being the case, For instance, I'll give you another example, the word church. Christians go to church. Where does that word come from? The word church actually comes from the word meaning circle. The Greek circe and the Scottish Gaelic kirk meant a circle, circe, a circle. But the circle, just like we said, it's not just about a crocodile in the Nile. Well, in this analogy, it's not just about a circle, any circle, all circles. It's a specific kind of circle that was the church. The circle of the circumpolar region of the sky. Up there in the northern part of the sky where the pole is, where the pole basically faces, course, the pole is leaning, isn't it? 23 degrees, but it still points up to the sky, nevertheless.
Right.
So that part that the pole points to was always considered the heaven of heavens, the holy of holies. And that circle, it's not very big, but it contains some very important stars like Ursa Minor and the famous pole stars, of course. That was, believe me, that was the original church. That's where the word comes from. The word church is a corruption of the goddess who ruled that celestial garden of the north. That little circle was always considered a celestial garden, a celestial enclosure. It was known as the Garden of Aru. It was known as many names. In Scandinavia, it's called Asgard. Asgard. You see, it's Camelot, you know. It's all sorts of names have been given to it down through time. But the ruling deity of the garden was called Ta'urt. It's where the word taro comes from. But the word Ta'urt, the T's were softened to CH. So the Ta'urt became Charuch or Charut, which is the origin of the word church. So again, the very church that Christians go to is based on the stars. You had even Ralph Ellis on it not too long ago, and he was giving a fascinating interview with you about his take on the meaning of the word Camelot. Remember that?
Right, yeah.
You pointed out that the ancient name of Egypt was Cam, you see, and in the Arthurian tradition you have this famous Camelot. But see, Camelot didn't just Cam, and first of all, Cam did not mean Egypt. Cam meant the Black Land,
right?
The land of the mysteries, the land of the sacred teachings. Okay, and the sacred teachings, as I'm saying, was astrology. So their Cam is the Hermetic sciences, which involves astrology. The land of astrology, the land of the tree and the serpent. Now, when we find it in the Arthurian tradition, Camelot, it referred to the cam up there. Cam is a word that means to revolve, like camshaft in a car.
Right.
So yeah, the word Camelot represented the round table up there in the sky, you know. Caer Sidhi was what the ancient Gaelic used to call it, the revolving castle, the round table, the zodiac. So all of this, without the Astro Theology, you see, you're bound to think of it in terms of physical realities, physical people, physical events, and it's fine to study that and all the rest of it, but too many scholars are constantly leaving out the astrotheological aspect, and they're heading for trouble when they do that. You know, all of the Arthurian pantheon, just like the dramatis personae of the Bible, just like the famous 12 tribes of Israel, all of it can be related to the heavens. All of it took their names from constellational phenomena, from data from the heavens, you see. You know, for instance, the Morgan Le Fay. Well, Morgan Le Fay is borrowed from the old... in fact, all the pantheon of... Do you know the whole pantheon of the Arthurian legend is basically a rescripting of the older Gaelic pantheon from Ireland.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Excalibur, for instance, the sword Excalibur that King Arthur wields is nothing more than a total rescripting of the sword of the great High King Nada, and that sword was called Retaliator. It's a prototype of Excalibur. Excalibur is not original. It comes from Irish mythology, that the great sword of power that will vibrate when evil comes near it, you see, and is a sign of great royalty, and if the king doesn't have his sword, you know, he's in trouble and all that.
Right.
So we have, like, Morgan Le Fay. This is the sister of King Arthur in the Arthurian legend. She is based on a goddess of the Irish tradition. This is thousands of years before Arthurian legend was scripted. Is known as the Morrigu or the Morrigan, a great queen, wizard of Ireland. We have Sir Lancelot, the famous Sir Lancelot, being based on the Sun King of Ireland, Lugh, who was the great warrior hero, you see, the one who prepared everyone for battle, and the one who defeated evil and was the Sun King. Right. So, you know, the list goes on. The whole Arthurian legend is not an Eastern concoction. It is absolutely a rescripting. It has a, I'm not denying that it hasn't been used by Christians of later ages.
Sure.
We've already established in this very show that the Christians cannibalized older traditions. But the fact of the matter is some of the older traditions go back to the zodiac and they go back to the old stellar cults of Ireland and the West. This is important. I'll give you one more example just. The word Druidism was divided into three categories, and the third category was a group known as the Ovates. O-V-A-T-E, Ovate. But that comes from a Gaelic word, fed, right? The fade is translated in our word today as faith.
Right.
Faith, the English word faith, having faith, or Adam faith, right, comes from the old Gaelic fed, which meant a druid. The word fate, like your destiny, your fate, the fates are with me, right?
Yeah.
Is exactly from the same Gaelic word root. And the word Vatican because the F and V have always been interchangeable. So Vate, fate, Vat, Vatican is also the place of the fates, or the man of faith. It has many meanings, because can also means the serpent. But the word Vatican can be translated as the place of the man of faith. But the original man of faith were the Ovates, was the Druidical order. The man of faith. And the job of the Ovate, the job of the Ovate, what the Ovates actually did within Druidism, was that they were judges. They were many things, but they were also judges. The word judge, Judah, comes from the same root as the word Judah, the tribe of Judah, or Jews.
Right.
Meaning that the Jews and the so-called tribe of Judah were nothing more than Ovates. They were the judges. They were the Levitical judges, you see. The words all come back to the same origin. So again, I'm doing this because we have to emphasize the fact that etymology, symbolism, this cuts through all of the nonsense, And if I may even give one more example.
Please go ahead.
If there's time, it's a short one. The word Kohen. All Jewish people refer to the Kohen as the priest. That's what in Hebrew Kohen, C-O-H-E-N, means, is high priest or prince. And originally it even represented a serpent prince, because there were Levites, there were people of the tribe of Dan, and the symbol of the tribe of Dan was a serpent. Where does that word Kohen come from? Because we also have Caen, we have Cannes in France, like the town Cannes.
Right.
We have Caen, right? We have Calvin, because John Calvin changed his name. The name was Cohen, actually, John Cohen. The founder of Protestantism was Jewish, and he was called John Cohen. And he changed his name to Calvin. But the origin of that word, Henrik, is Irish. Con, C-O-N, is the root from which all those words come. And con in Irish meant the priest. Isn't it strange that today when we use the word con, C-O-N, it means a fraud?
Right.
Look at the way, again, words have a mysterious way of telling you the truth about something. It is a con. These priests are nothing but a con. Even the Cohens and the cons, it turns out in the end to mean the greatest con on earth.
Conspiracy,
Conspiracy. Priest-spiracy.
Right.
It's just never ending, It's fascinating, this
Interesting
stuff with the words.
Yeah.
But make no mistake about it, there was a flow from the west to the east of these traditions. It wasn't that somebody, in the east came and brought enlightenment or astro theology or any kind of theology to Britain. Quite the reverse.
Michael, we have about 7 minutes left, before we need to round things up. But the Scythians or Scythians, is that something that you would like to touch upon at all in this program here?
Yeah, this is again a key area that I've gone into. The study of secret society symbolism led me to it. It tells us something is not correct about most of the theories concerning the origins of, religion and Freemasonry, Templarism, and so on. Again, symbolism. You see, one of the things that we notice in secret society organizations is the use of the double cross.
Indeed.
Not just one cross, but two. I've always wondered why that was. I've always wondered why the symbol of the Knights Templar is the two knights riding a single horse.
Yeah.
Often that horse is shown facing the left or the western side. The horse's head is facing west. And this really fascinated me because it goes into the whole story of the connection between the Scythians, which is northern Europeans, and the Hyksos dynasty of Egypt. This was a very big theme in the Irish Origins book.
Yeah.
And basically all I want to say about it is that we don't even know, first of all, if the word Scythian is truly a word that was used by these people. The earliest word that we can find for them is Saka, S-A-C-A or S-A-K-A, and it's the origin of the word Saxon.
Interesting.
Because the Scythians, the Scythians were in fact the ancestors of many different groups. They're the ancestors of a very interesting group called the Sarmatians that have just come to light. Who are married to the Amazon women. Anyone who's into Amazons, the famous warrior females, you see, there's a connection here.
Right.
But they all go back to Scythian. The language they spoke was a form of Scythian, you see. So who are these amazing Scythians? And to me, my book explores the Scythian-Hyksos connection, and we'll put up plenty of links on this Red Eyes page.
Right.
I hope people will look into, because it's a fascinating thing, But Saka did not mean, like people are telling us, blade men or spearmen. They always tell you lies about what these words mean. Some words are particularly corrupted. They make sure you never find out the word, like the meaning of the word Gothic.
Right.
The meaning of the word Scythian. They definitely, and the word Celtic. These are some words that for centuries the conspiracy is that, you're not going to find out the true meaning of these words. But the word Saka actually meant stag men.
Horsemen.
And the stag was the famous Hern, the famous forest god of Egypt that was also venerated, believe it or not, in Egypt. There's even a goddess of the hind, very much like Diana, the Greek goddess Diana, who's always shown with a hind. Isis was always shown with a hind. There was other goddesses also shown with the stag god, the hind goddess, you see. So the Scythians then were the stag men. And Saka also gives rise to the name Isaac. Isaac is actually wrongly pronounced. It should be pronounced Isaac, right? The Saka, Isa of the Saka, right? It's the Saka.
Right.
Like Saxon. Anglo-Saxon is a corruption of the word Saka. The Scythians, the people of the great knowledge, the people of the, in fact, talk about one word earlier when we were talking, the whole idea of one language, one Tower of Babel, one universal language. This ties into the Scythians because they were the great masters of knowledge and the great masters of language. They had a worldwide college. And these Scythians and Isaac was who? Isaac was the son of Abraham, who came from Egypt. From where? The northwest. He came into Egypt from the north. And the Bible will always tell you that he came from, Mesopotamia, from Babylon, from Ur.
Yeah.
But could it be that he was a Scythian and came from further north, from even into Europe, him and his son? Yeah. The word Isaac seems to indicate so.
Very interesting. So this.
What happens then if it turns out that the founders of Egypt, even before the time I usually talk about, even in the later times of the time of the Hyksos, turn out to be also connected to northwestern tribes?
Well, it's possible. At this point at least, we don't have any clear connection, I guess, or connection we have, but we don't have the clear evidence for it. But a lot of things, it could very well be that way. We don't know.
Again, people have to look into the etymology. This is the meaning of words, to look into the origins of these. I think it really does give a lot of evidence when you look at that. My book goes into the story of the Chaldeans, the story of the Amorites. Let's look at another word. For instance, the Babylon was there was a great city called Eridu.
Right.
On the Tigris and Euphrates River. Eridu. Eri, because Eridu is spelled E-R-I-D-U. Eri is one of the oldest known Irish goddesses. It's where we get the word Hera, like the Greek goddess Hera. It's also where we get the word terra, like terra firma, terrestrial. Right. It comes from a goddess's name, the ancient name of Tara in Ireland, Terry. Well, we have in Babylon, Eridu, the very name of the goddess of Ireland is one of the cities of Egypt, cities of Babylon. Right. We can go further. We have a term called Erech, E-R-E-C-H, was the whole region of Mesopotamia that later became known in the Bible as Shinar, the plains of Shinar, which represented the whole of Mesopotamia. No, Shinar is only a biblical meaning of that name. The original name was Erech, E-R-E-C-H. Now ask a Scandinavian person that they don't recognize that word, Erech.
It's a name, yeah, of course.
It's one of the most oldest and famous names.
Right.
Very distinctive. It's very distinct. Etymology is very distinctive. You find this, and then you go to the Babylonians, and they're telling you that Marduk, the worship of the god Marduk, who is more best known as Merodach, that's nothing but the Irish Murdoch, is coming from the northwest.
Yeah.
The Babylonians, in their own writings, tell you that their civilization was started by Northwesterners. You see, we get the word erected, like when you erect a monument, Erech.
Right, of course.
Ur. Abraham's home city, Ur. Isaac's home city, Ur. No, it's not Ur, it's Ar. Aria, from the R. A-R. See, words, vowels have been twisted so that we don't see this. There's so many words. Did you know Sumeria is Sum-Aria?
Sum-Aria.
The land of the Aria. And that the word in Gaelic, Scots Gaelic, Sumer, means serpent.
Really?
Like I said, yeah. And Murdoch, I just said Marduk is a very poor translation of Merodach.
Yeah.
Merodach. Where have we heard the mer, M-E-R, is the biggest giveaway. I've written chapters on just that word root alone. Yeah. M-E-R, representing not only the builders of the pyramid, who we've established as Arya, but Mer is men of the sea. You were talking about them earlier.
Yeah, indeed.
So word root that turns up in Mercury, turns up in merchant. Who are the mercurial ones? Who are the merchants? The mer. And then we can track them. Amorites, right? This is exactly in the Babylonians, one of the oldest civilizations is called Amorite, coming from the word mer, M-E-R.
Right.
And then those people can be tracked all the way down into France and Spain as the Merovingian dynasty.
That's right. Yeah. Big.
We've got a tremendous chain of etymology here, and in fact, the Mer were nothing more than the Phoenicians. These very sea people that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But here's the key with that. The Phoenician is also not really their own name. They didn't call themselves that.
Right.
The Phoenicians referred to, and all the ancient original historians referred to the Phoenicians as the word Kabiri. But even the word Kabiri is a corruption. It should be Kab-Ari.
Right. Okay.
Not Kabiri, but Kabari. The Kab-Ari. There's your Ari again, the Arya.
Yeah.
We find this word Kabari. This or the Arya. And here's the interesting thing: they were the builders of the Temple of Solomon. They worked in trees. They were the men who worked with the wood better than anyone else in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the word Kabbalah come from? Kab-Ari, Kabbalah? Could the Kabbalistic system be of the Kabari? I think so. And it's a tree of life, isn't it? Well, the Kabari were the great tree men. They were the great builders of the temples of Solomon who knew wood better than anyone else. Their physical temples were a Kabbalistic temple. The Kabbalah is nothing but a theoretical temple, isn't it? A secret tradition.
Right.
Right, so who builds the temple? People are thinking about a physical temple in stone. No. Who builds the temple? Who are the temple men? Who are the priests of the great temple of the Kabbalah, of the knowledge? These are the Kabari, you see. And Egypt was even known as the land of the tree and the serpent.
That's right. Yeah, of course.
Years before Christianity ever took birth. That's related to Astro Theology, but it also relates to the Mer, to these Phoenicians, their high teachings.
So we have
division, and it's people. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to say again we have all of these different names and that has been put upon potentially the same people. We have over here we have the Phoenicians, over there we have the Scythians, over here as you say we have the Kabari, whatever it is. But what we might possibly be looking at is again the same people, and although we have these many different names, in many cases we still can find the connection in the etymology, right?
From the etymology, absolutely, because this is something that couldn't be wholly changed. They've done a beautiful job, don't get me wrong. Vowels have been totally interchanged, consonants have been interchanged, titles have been renamed into names and names into titles, and I go into this in the Irish Origins book. There's a chapter on this called The Sacred Language of the Ancients,
right,
where I talk about the ways that the language is corrupted. For instance, the word Osiris. I've always maintained in my book that Osiris was originally a Western god that was brought to Egypt. He wasn't native to Egypt at all. It's a perfect example of what you're talking about. If you spell the word Osiris, it's O-S-I-R-I-S. But in Egyptian, it's not spelled like that at all. It's spelled as Osiris, A-U-S-A-R-E-S. But that again is a corruption. It's not Osiris, it's Osari. Osiris is really Osari.
Right.
A-U-S, right? That's one word. A-U-S, separate word, A-R-I. Osari. The god of the Ari.
Right.
The man of the earth, the man of the wisdom, the man of the secrets. You see, so, my God, man, we've got Bulgaria. Bel, like Baltic and Baldur. Bulgaria is nothing more than Belgaria, Arya.
Right.
Bulgaria. Area, there's the word. Sumeria, like I said. Armenia. Armenia. Iran, like the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland. Aran. Right? One of the ancient names in India, in fact, one of the earliest and the most important names of India was Arya Nadu, or Arya Desu, meaning the land of the Arya. We got Joseph of Arimathea. Also, we had Ralph Ellis talking about the famous Joseph of Arimathea, right? Who became the custodian of Jesus of Gamala, remember?
Yeah.
Took him down from the cross, kind of negotiated with the lunatic Vespasian to make sure that he could get custody of these crucified men, you see, who were terribly, castrated and terribly deformed, right?
Yeah.
The famous Joseph of Arimathea that all the British Israelites do somersaults over, saying who brought Jesus to Britain. So there we have it.
Yeah.
Well, that whole story, the real story is told in my Irish Origins book is anything but that. But the point being that there we have the Ari Mathea bit is already saying Joseph of the Ari.
Right. Very interesting.
I mean, we've got it's all there, man, for the trained eye to see.
Very, very interesting. Michael, before we round things up here for our program here today, I do want to talk a little bit about the upcoming conference. We need to squeeze that in here. As I said, the 3rd and 4th of May, Michael will be attending the Beyond Knowledge conference that is taking place in Liverpool, England. So if you're interested in hearing Michael Tsarion speak or some of the other researchers there, we have David Hatcher Childress, Marcus Allen, Jerry Smith, Ken Thomas, Ralph Ellis is going to be there. Also Ian Crane and David Griffin. If you're interested in that, you need to pop on over to their website for more information about tickets and times, where it is, etc., etc. The website is beyond-knowledge.co.uk. Again, that's beyond-knowledge.co.uk. So if you're in either in England or around the UK area, or in Europe for that matter, and are interested in that, that's definitely something worth checking out. And Michael, tell us a little bit what you're going to be talking about on the conference.
I've been invited to speak on the Irish origins, basically. The book came out last November, and it's been just great. People we've been sold out for over a month. Can't keep the books in.
Very good. Yeah.
It's just outrageous. So I did agree, to do this conference as a perfect opportunity to do my first talk ever, actually, in the world, apart from our show. We've did 4 or 5 shows on the Irish origins of civilization.
Yeah.
Including this one, actually, would make a good
addition to that.
Yeah, exactly, that series. But I've never done a public talk, and I didn't know if I was going to do one, for various reasons and whatnot. And I could talk on lots of other things as well. But I'll definitely be doing this talk on the Irish origins of civilization. It will be a slideshow presentation. Been glad to participate in that because it's a tremendous list of speakers there.
Yeah.
Ralph Ellis is a huge mentor of mine. I love his work. Read everything he's written.
Yeah.
David Hatcher Childress is a legend in the field.
Right.
Absolutely. So, Ken Thomas, look at the work he's done,
Yeah.
He's a good friend, and he and Jerry Smith have always been very supportive. In my early days when I started, when I did conferences and appeared in public, they literally were like so supportive and so happy to see me. It was a very welcoming feeling.
Very good.
This goes for so many others as well, but so I think that people who miss this, it's this crazy, they should really get over there, if not to see what I'm doing, but definitely to support and to keep this kind of subject matter alive, to show people that we will turn up for events like this, and we have got the interest. Because just look at the rubbish, that's out there. I mean, it's stupefying when you just think of the utter nonsense,
Yeah, yeah.
So when you have a group of teachers and thinkers of this caliber,
it's
in one place, people should support it, with everything they've got,
Exactly. So again, if you're interested in catching Michael or some of the other fine researchers, speakers there, go over to the website beyond-knowledge.co.uk, and myself from Fredrik is going to be there also, not to do any talks or anything, but definitely to meet up with some of the fine researchers and listen to their talks. It's going to be a lot of fun getting over there, and I guess we'll see you there, Michael.
That's true. One other point, Henrik, is that I will not be bringing any merchandise, so if people want to have a signed copy of anything, they need to make their purchases online, just as a aside. That people need to realize that I won't be bringing any, books or tapes or anything like that. These are all available online, and if they want something signed, they'll have to bring it with them, because I won't be bringing merchandise myself.
Okay, very good. You know what? Also, before we finish up here, tell us when do you think that the new book here on Astro Theology will be out, and what website do people need to go to get a copy of that when it's out?
It's pretty much written now. It's just we have other things to do, of course, like layout and all these things, and it does take a bit of time. So maybe within the next 90 days, we should see the first copies. I mean, I don't push anything because I like things to be as good as they can be.
Right.
But ultimately, it's a job nearly finished, so I think it should be this summertime, late spring, summer should be already finished, and people can see lots of previews and excerpts, and on the website astro-theology.net or astro-theology.org, either one. They can go to those, or just go to michaeltsarion.com and you'll see the link.
Exactly.
And they can see all the, the previews there.
Very good. The main website again is michaeltsarion.com, and for the topic that we've been speaking about tonight here, or today here, is astro-theology.net. That's going to get you a lot more information on that one. Michael, thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you for listening to Red Ice Creations Radio. We will be back on Thursday with David Hatcher Childress. We'll be talking about the crystal skulls and Easter Island. Fascinating program, not to be missed. My thanks to Fredrik behind the controls. My name is Henrik Palmgren. The website is redicecreations.com. REDICE creations.com. See you online, and we'll talk more soon.
As I roved out one fine summer's morn, among lofty hills, moorlands and mountains, it was there I spied a Wilford maid, as I way others was out a hunting. No shoes nor stockings did he wear, and neither had she cap nor feather, but her golden hair hung ringlets fair, and the gentle breeze blew round her shoulders. I said, "Bra lassie, why roam your lane? Why roam your lane among the heather?" She said, "My father's a waffry him, and I'm herding all his yows together." I said, "Bra lassie, if you'll be mine, and care to lie on a bed of feather, in silks and satins you will shine, and you'll be my queen among the heather." She said, "Kind sir, your offer's good, but I'm afraid 'twas meant for laughter, for I see you are some rich squire's son, and I am but a poor shepherd's doctor. But had ye been a shepherd, a herding yows in yonder valley, or had ye been some ploughman's son, wi' all my heart I could you give. Now I've been to halls and I've been to balls, I have been to London and Belvedere, but the bonniest lass that e'er I saw, she was herding yows among the heather. So we both sat down upon the plain, we sat a while and we talked together, and we left the yows to stray their lane, till I load my queen